Schönen Vormittag, meine Damen und Herren. Ich darf Sie recht herzlich.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the presentation of the Erste Group results. The presentation will be broadcast live on the internet in German and English, and the representatives of the media are going to ask their questions. And at the end of the press conference, we're going to read them out. For all those who want to ask questions here in the room, please wait for the roving microphone to make sure that everybody in the live stream can hear your questions. I would now like to hand over to our CEO, Bernd Spalt. Thank you very much. A cordial welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having taken the time in these special days. Before we start reporting on our results, I would like to make a few comments on the current situation. We are a bank that is operating in the heart of Europe, and the news about a war at our doorstep are a disaster, a tragedy, not only in the political, international law and economic sense, but also in terms of a humanitarian sense. All of us that are sitting here have close ties to Ukraine. We have a lot of employees working there, who come from there, who have families there, and we are deeply concerned about the developments there. This is a situation that is affecting us at a personal level, and that is very important to us. And wherever we can and wherever it makes sense, it is clear that we will help and support and lend our assistance. We are not only going to spread a message of sympathy, but we are also going to try to actively help. We are discussing with the Red Cross, Caritas, and the local NGOs and relief organizations. We are in touch with all of them, and we are trying to help in whatever way possible. In the context of this European idea, we are faced with a special situation. This underlines what we have repeatedly said: Europe needs to become stronger, more robust. Europe needs to converge, and prosperity doesn't work without democracy, and democracy doesn't work without peace. I think this is where we need to go, and this is where things need to happen. Efforts need to be undertaken to make sure we can return to a normal life. Now, quite apart from the human tragedies, I would also like to mention something about the business model of the Erste Group in terms of Ukraine and Russia. We ourselves don't have any subsidiaries in Russia, Belarus, or Ukraine. Our credit exposure in this region is negligible. So what we expect here, what we can expect or have to expect in terms of a direct impact and the outflow coming from these turbulences and this war, in terms of our own business activity, can be well digested. Also, our customers, whom we are in constant touch with and whom we are providing our advice to, are going to manage. But what this will lead to is that these turbulences in the international financial markets will remain high, the volatility will remain high, the uncertainty will increase, and on the whole, we are heading towards a phase of uncertainty. Well, I understand the need for some people to want to know everything and to be able to make major announcements and grandiose statements, but we should refrain from doing that, because sometimes we simply don't know. Sometimes it is best to wait rather than making strong statements. Sometimes it is better to wait and analyze and see what path can emerge out of this crisis before we draw major conclusions. This is not the time to draw any conclusions. This is the time to try to reach more stability. This is the time to start thinking and analyzing and trying to bridge a situation that is unparalleled. This is not the time to make grandiose statements. So we are only affected to a very, very limited extent, economically speaking. Of course, we're going to closely monitor sanctions, the way we always do. We're going to follow the situation and make sure that we stick to the sanctions and correctly implement those sanctions. This is extremely important to us. We want to be a player you can count on in the European and in the global context. We want to be calculable and well-behaved. And on the whole, and Stefan, Alexandra, and Ingo are going to refer to this, our business model is very robust and very successful. But still, this situation is casting its shadows over everything else we would have liked to report on, the green transformation, the green transition. Well, all the other things are now in the backdrop in light of what's happening at the political level. So my appeal to you would be to maybe hold back making high-flying statements, try to reflect on the situation and try to play a relevant role in order to help improve the situation and not to escalate tensions further. I would like to appeal to everybody, and this is an appeal directed to everybody out there. So basically, I trust that Europe will be strengthened by this crisis and will be moving closer together, and it will find a way out of this situation without being broken. I think this is an opportunity for Europe to find a different way. And this is something I would like to add. To the best of our ability, we are going to make our contribution. With this introductory statement, I would like to talk about what we have come here to talk about, namely how we're doing in terms of our business situation. Thank you. Thank you very much, Bernd Schwald. I would like to tell you that it's not exactly easy to talk about our results, about actually our excellent economic situation, but still, I believe it is important to ensure that we do not lose sight of our own operating activities. So I would like to invite you to take a look at the results for 2021. The Erste Group had a strong or even an excellent operating result. The main drivers of this excellent operating result had been the fee income. I think Mr. Bleier is going to elaborate more on that, namely across all product groups. On the security side, we pursued our strategy. We're very successful in terms of payment transactions after the drop in 2020. During the time of the pandemic, we used this, and together with our partner VIG, we were very successful in terms of bank assurance. The net interest income in the second half of 2021, that I will be talking about in more detail, was supported strongly by a hike in interest rates in non-euro countries in the East, and another strong supporting factor of the net interest income has been a healthy loan volume growth across all countries and across all segments. In terms of the operating expenses, we can say that we are managing our costs. The necessary investments have been made, and at the same time, we have a good grip on the development of costs. In concrete terms, in 2021, on the expenses side, we were exactly more or less where we were in 2019, so the last year before the pandemic. And since 2021 was a very dynamic year, economically speaking, this is a very positive sign. On the one hand, we're looking forward to investing in our business, and on the other hand, we are also highly effective and efficient. I promised that we'd look more into the interest rate situation, and here you see the situation as it presents itself. On the one hand, we have the countries that are part of the Eurozone, so Austria, Slovakia, Croatia, which as of the 1st of January 2023 will be joining the Eurozone. And I will leave Serbia aside for the time being. And then there's the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Romania. And here we've seen enormous dynamic in terms of the key interest rates, you see the difference between the end of 2020 and the end of 2021. And we'll click on now to the current status. So you see in the first 2 months of the year 2022, there's been a further increase, of course, as a reaction to the inflationary trends. And in the Czech Republic, we are now already seeing 4.5% for the key interest rate. 6 or 9 months ago, this was hardly conceivable. And of course, as far as our business activities in the Czech Republic are concerned, this has a very positive effect because our loan volume there, of course, can lead to better returns. We'll see how this plays out in general terms as far as inflation is concerned, but also in light of the recent very sad events. To what extent there will be an interaction or an impact. So if you'd like to follow me to take a look at the waterfall chart, so the net result of 2021 and 2021. So there are actually 3 essential drivers. On the one hand, of course, the operating income. I already discussed these. A significant and very positive increase of operating income across the board. Secondly, and Ms. Havila-Drabek will be talking about this in a minute, there's also been a substantially improved risk situation in 2020. We had made provisions for risks for much less positive outcome of the pandemic than it did turn out to be. So there's been a positive development here in terms of risk costs. And then there's also the minorities. Well, we normally don't speak too much about the minorities, but this means an excellent result of the Austrian Sparkassen, or savings banks, which are shown as minorities when it comes to the net profit of the Erste Group. And I myself am very pleased about the fact that together with our colleagues from the Sparkassen savings banks, we had such a wonderful result in 2021. And last but not least, I would like to point to the strong capitalization of the Erste Group as of the 31st of December 2021, 14.5% Common Equity Tier 1 ratio compared to 14.2%, which already had been excellent in 2020. So this enables us to make a dividend proposal to the amount of 1.6 euros to the Supervisory Board and to the Annual General Meeting of the Erste Group. And in future, our profits will be invested in further growth for the benefit of our customers in the region and also for good returns on investments for our investors. That is a clear goal, our clear commitment, and we are well underway in terms of reaching those goals. And now I would like to hand it over to Alexander Havila-Drabek to take a look at the risk side.
Thank you, Stefan. Also for me, it's not easy to talk here today, and I would have liked a better environment to talk about risk costs and falling figures, and we can be very proud of that. On this slide, you see the trend in risk costs and also expressed in basis points of the average loan volumes. In 2021, we have 9 basis points. Mr. Dafla already said that last year we built up reserves because we had a very forward-looking attitude as far as the pandemic is concerned, and had a front-loading approach. What about the situation in 2021? We didn't release the reserves that were built up in 2020. We don't see any defaults so far. Our customers are extremely doing well during the crisis and have been very successful in doing business, and also our private customers really managed the situation excellently. So I said we built up reserves in 2020, and We are carrying forward more than 90% to 2021, and as far as our view is concerned, we are well prepared for the current year, a year that is overshadowed by crises. We expect risk costs to rise, but to remain below the long-term average and achieve 20 basis points at the maximum. Of course, we need to be cautious in view of the current situation. Here you see the NPL ratio. It is also a very pleasing picture, and it also shows that our customers, private and corporate customers, were very successful. The NPL ratio is 2.4%. This is an unparalleled ratio in Erste Bank, and is due to the fact that we, thank God, have no defaults, but also is due to a strong growth in loans, which has a positive effect on this ratio. The NPL coverage ratio remains at a very high level, more than 90%. So we carried on reserves to 2022. We haven't seen any defaults of our customers, and the high NPL coverage ratio contributes to the fact that in 2022, although we have uncertainties, we remain optimistic that risk costs will remain to be low in 2022. 9 basis points. This is not the new normal situation. This is not what we expect for the future, and it is not our goal either. We are in the loans business, and we like to do business, and if you give loans, you have to take risks, and we will be most willing to take risks, and this will be reflected in other risk costs and go beyond 9 basis points.
Thank you, Alexandra. Ladies and gentlemen, some more figures for you. Of course, it's not easy to be speaking about commercial success stories. I'll try to do it with an eye on the fact that we're all proud of the fact what we have achieved together with our customers in 2021. As Stefan Dörfler already said, we grew in all customer segments. Housing loans showed a growth of more than 11%. So we outperformed the economic growth and the strong recovery last year. We really managed to support our clients. Our volume is now more than 66 billion euros in terms of housing loans. We had slightly less growth for consumer loans. We are not really very offensive when it comes to originating consumer loans, but we are seeing that consumer confidence is bouncing back, and we are undertaking efforts to make financing available. Now, what we've been very pleased about is that we have managed to get more and more of our customers to invest in a well-diversified securities portfolio. We have increased our volume of securities savings plans by more than 40% last year. What really helps us here is also a strong expansion of our digital business. With the George platform, in our entire core region, with the exception of Serbia, we had created a channel for our customers that enables them to handle almost all business transactions online, and more than 25% of our sales is now handled via George. So as colleague Poletto told us about George and Erste Digital, well, this is unparalleled what they have achieved, and we're very pleased that we have experienced very good growth. You see the last countries that were added were Hungary and Croatia, and in those countries where we've had a presence for longer, we saw very strong growth rates and especially dynamic development in Romania. This year we also want to spread this to the corporate business clients, and all those who already know the platform should also use it for their corporate business, and we're going to start here in Austria to also roll out George for our business customers. Now this takes me to the corporate clients and capital market business. As on the retail side, we have grown across the board. We have the SME business, the key account business, the public sector, real estate business. So we grew across the board in all segments, and we now have more than 63 billion corporate loans, with a strong growth of almost 9% last year. And in almost all countries where we have a presence, we've been able to increase our market share. So here in Austria, in the corporate business, we had strong growth, and that is also shown by our customer care department. So we can convince more and more customers to work with our banks when it comes to financing. But of course, not only financing. Here you only see an excerpt of our total business. But of course, there's a lot of transaction business, trade finance, document business, and we are seeing a very good development. In the area of capital markets, well, this has been a record year. If you take a look at the segmental reporting and the trading and emissions business, we had strong growth. We've never had as many issuance of stocks and bonds as we had in 2021 in terms of asset management, when it comes to managing the assets of our retail customers, but also institutional customers. We had almost 13% growth last year, and also for sustainable assets, we had an increase of almost 15%. This is the green part of the chart that you see on the left. So on the whole, a very positive development and a very strong basis for further growth together with our clients and customers. And now I would like to hand back to Bernd for the outlook for 2022. Well, thank you. Thank you, Alexandra, Ingo, and Stefan. Well, very briefly, the outlook for 2022, what we expect is, in line with the economic development, a strong demand growth for loans, and we believe that we are going to have a good fee and commission income, so the revenue is going to rise stronger than the costs, so our cost revenue profile will improve. The risk profile is completely under control, I would say, and the return on tangible equity is much below the cost of equity. So our capital position is such that our surplus capital is not just invested in organic growth. We are doing that, and we're doing it in a profitable way, but we can also make use and will make use of acquisition opportunities. We are now at 14.5% Common Equity Tier 1. Our management goal is 13.5%, so our Common Equity Tier 1 is well equipped, so we can also use opportunities for growth and to buy some banks that support our business model and our further growth in our region. Of course, our region, well, we'll not leave our region. Wherever we have a presence, I think we have a strong position and we'll stay there. Today, we'd like to talk a lot about other things, but I think this is not the appropriate time to do so. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to start with the first question. Ms. Graber from Standard.
Mr. Spalt, I wanted to ask you, what is your opinion in relation to the sanctions, and what will be the effect on Erste Bank and other banks and the financial market in Austria?
Well, this is a very large and complex question, and in the coming days we're going to find out more about how it will play out. What we can say in general terms is that the exclusion of some Russian banks from the SWIFT system, which is the financial telecommunications system for payment transactions between banks, which links 200 countries and banks and brokers. So, of course, a lot of things will become harder for the Russian economy. Not all banks, but the main banks of the Russian banking landscape have been excluded from the SWIFT system. This will make transactions harder or make them virtually impossible. And since we have no direct exposure there, and have no major customer exposure there, we're not going to feel a lot from that. But on the whole, the economic flows will be slowed down, and there will be an impact on economic growth. So in this entire constellation, it won't help to have higher energy prices. So this is not exactly going to slow down inflation. So over time, when the technical details of the sanctions will become clear, well, for the time being, we only know which direction we're headed in without knowing the details, but as soon as the details will emerge, we're going to be able to draw more concrete conclusions. But on the whole, we can say that the economic leeway for the Russian economy will be restricted. I think we can safely say that. We're already seeing first application of the sanctions in the European context, where a bank domiciled here in Austria, but which is owned by Russia and which works in a transnational capacity, is affected by these sanctions, and they've seen liquidity outflow, and the European authorities, so this is a European case, of course, where the authorities in Brussels and the ECB in Frankfurt have intervened, and I think they have done the right thing, and they have imposed a moratorium. So for 2 days it will be analyzed what the consequences will be, to make sure that not a lot of value is destroyed. And we already are seeing a lot of practical applications, and Ms. Garber, these are still early days where the complexity and the stakeholders who are involved in this game will emerge slowly, and where this regime of sanctions will be meeting with the political players in this field. So we've never seen that before. Martin Kwauke from the live stream asks, what risk costs do you expect in the medium term?
If we look at the last years, the so-called through the cycle, that is to say, if you smooth it over the period of time, we had risk costs between 30 and 50 basis points. Against the background of the COVID crisis, we saw that our credit portfolio, our loans portfolio has a higher quality than expected. We had cautious underwriting and a very prudent risk policy in the past years, which resulted in an improvement of the situation, and I'm confident that we shouldn't expect 30 to 50 for the coming years, but below 30. Thank you.
Frage.
Okay, thank you. A question from Mr. Cevina from Wiener Zeitung.
Ja, hallo.
Hello, actually I have 3 questions. First question. Do you have to freeze Russian assets in the course of the crisis? What's the volume and in which markets will this take place? And then another question relating to the core business. Do you expect risks to rise or NPLs to rise after the governmental measures expiring at the end of March? And as far as loans and advances are concerned, do you think the market will overheat, or do you expect eruptions in the course of the crisis? Let me start with your second question. In our risk cost planning, we expect some defaults to take place in 2020. Before the crisis, we had a relatively low level of defaults. 2020, no defaults at all, and 21, a little bit more. Yes, we expect a catch-up effect, but nothing that is dramatic or unpleasant or would cause any problems. As far as the sanctions are concerned, this is a complicated legal setup. We shouldn't underestimate the character of these sanctions, the legal character of the sanctions, and to draw necessary measures or to plan necessary measures. So I can't tell whether we have to freeze assets. Of course, we will abide by the sanctions, and our colleagues are working around the clock. Today, we started analyzing legal documents again. But if there are customers in our customer portfolio which are subject to such freezes, we of course will do that.
I would like to talk about the housing loans and any potential bubbles. I would like to place this in the context. Over the past many years, we have had a very low interest environment or negative interest environment, and a lot of investments went into real estate, and real estate prices have really gone up substantially. This will not stop, even though some interest hikes are already happening in some regions. So the real estate prices will be rising more quickly than incomes will be rising. And this leads to two essential results. At first, the regulators are going to be worried because is it still possible to have a housing construction based on loans? And aren't we really expecting too much from people who take out loans? And how much equity should people have in order to make it affordable for somebody to buy an apartment or a house? And another aspect that is just as important and that should also be discussed is where are we headed when it comes to young families that are seeing it increasingly impossible to find a home. There's a crowding out effect. Even the freely financed market is not available anymore because it's way too expensive and no longer affordable. I think we need to discuss it from a holistic perspective. We shouldn't just say we're afraid of prices going up too much and things not being affordable anymore, but we need to take a look at what is the desirable end result we want to pursue. So it is not only the regulators, but also the politicians and the banks that need to negotiate this in order to make it, well, affordable to have housing. Over the past decades, I think we've achieved a lot also in terms of being a role model for other countries in our region in order to make affordable housing possible. And this is what we need to return to. That's an important topic. I'm not afraid of a real estate bubble as such, but I have respect if we are going to see some parts of our population who can no longer buy a starter apartment, and other parts of our society have 4 or 5 apartments. So I think it is important to make sure that basic needs are met in our democracies, and that needs to be affordable in a context that is also characterized by a lot of vulnerabilities. That's the way I see it. Thank you. We have a question from Ingrid Gravrik from Börsianer. Before boss Felbermayr said that the RBI bank needs to think about a protective shield. Do you think there will be short-term liquidity bottlenecks? What does this mean for the Erste Group and the Austrian banking sector? Well, in my introductory statement, I tried to briefly refer to that. I think sometimes there are times when we should start analyzing and reflecting before drawing conclusions. The second thing I would like to say, even though I am not supposed to talk about competitors, I want to, I think RBI is a well-positioned bank, and I believe that they can deal with difficult situations and circumstances, and that's all I'm going to say about that at the time being. It doesn't help to make strong statements that don't solve problems, but that actually exacerbate problems. Thank you. There's a question from Mr. Unterhuber, der Kurier. Mr. Spalt, do you have a plan B if what the head of the WIFO Economic Research Institute, Felbermayr, wants, namely that Russia might stop its gas supplies, which might have an impact not only on households, but the entire economy and the industry that needs gas, and those are probably even your customers. So do you have a plan B for that, or are you still waiting and seeing for a couple of days? I think it's time to wait and see, and we need to ask ourselves some serious questions as a bank in terms of what role we can play. We are not politicians, we are not the ones who have a plan B for energy security. I think when such bottlenecks come up, we can always provide financing and assist in this way, but whether there will be a slow transition or an abrupt transition, well, that needs to be planned at the political level, and then we can orchestrate it or help orchestrate it at the economic level. So within the framework of sanctions, whatever we can do, we will help our customers. So when the COVID crisis started, we agreed immediately that we keep our credit lines open, will remain accessible, no commitments will be cancelled, and that's the way we want to proceed now. So, like Bernd Spalt said, everything that can contribute to exacerbate the conflict is not really something we want to go for. Another question in the live stream from Susanne Pickel, Die Presse. What do you think is the impact of the new loan standards of the Financial Market Authority?
I think you mean the standards for giving loans for real property. Let me say something in general. These basic criteria, the basic conditions is something that we know from many countries. What we could see in the past was that it had an influence, a short-term influence on demand, but in total did not result in a rapid decrease of demand. How the situation is going to develop in Austria is we don't know. What Mr. Spalt said is very important. If we have reasonable criteria that allow young people access to financing real property, and this is an adequate measure to limit risks and will not result in excluding segments of our population, and we don't expect any massive influence on our business.
Da war noch eine Frage.
Renate Graber has a question.
Ich wollte nur kurz
Mr. Spalt, do you think Mr. Felbermayr wouldn't have said a word?
Mit dem Thema Moment.
I think I already said that I don't want to deal with this question right now.
Aus dem Live
There's one more question from the live stream. Claudia Hase, Kleine Zeitung. What might severely curtail the growth of the Erste Group in light of the current developments? Well, generically speaking, and I think Ingo Bley is going to come in on that as well, we reflect the economy. If the economy is growing, if there's a low rate of unemployment, our business is going to boom. If there's a recession, we are going to feel the pinch. So when it comes to sanctions, political turbulences and upheaval, if there's a slowdown of growth and everything that prevents trade will certainly not have a positive influence on our situation. But our region is very robust, the way it is positioned right now. Well, we saw last year that the existing economic growth was also reflected in our results. We feel the impact if there's a few investments made by companies due to the uncertainties, or companies tend to wait with major investments because of uncertainty. This typically will lead to a lower demand for loans, and this is a risk factor that we might be faced with this year. Are there any further questions here in the room? There are none in the live stream. So, if all your questions have been answered, thank you very much and have a nice day. Thank you. Thank you.